I've had the great opportunity to work in two worlds of boards and CEOs. I've had the opportunity to work in the association world, and IEDC is a Washington-based membership association. I also have many of my members and more specifically board members who have boards of their own, and watching them as they build relationships and partnerships with their boards has been particularly instructful to me as I've had to work with many boards here at IEDC. I think the key to their relationships is a common vision for their communities, and our members are working like you, Stuart, in the field of economic development. They're trying to create, retain, and expand jobs, and so there oftentimes appears to be a unified vision and mission. The board is local business people, local politicians who have helped to fund the economic development effort, and they've hired either locally or through a national competition a CEO to actually come and run that. That they do that around a mutual vision, a mutual faith, sometimes a mutual disaster. And when we were in the recession, many communities viewed their economic development organization as the most important thing that was going to help move their community out of the catastrophe we were in, high unemployment, people losing homes, companies going out of business. And it is with that collaboration between the CEO and the board, and smart CEOs get that. They get that they're not the Lone Ranger, they're not the sole soldier. It is that collaboration between the board and CEO that makes this thing tick.
Yeah, and so building on what Jeff talks about, I often talk about, use the analogies of team and teamwork in a lot of different environments, and this is one situation and one place where the CEO and the board that he or she works with really has to see themselves as a team and see the role of the CEO is constantly building that team and making sure that the team knows what they're trying to achieve collectively, and that they have the resources and the capabilities to be successful in growing that team and achieving the goals that they set out to achieve. And so I think it is really critical to make sure that that the working relationship is strong, and that the CEO always understands that it has the responsibility to build that team and direct that team towards the common goal that that the entity, the organization, the community is trying to achieve. I think that one of the things that I've seen CEOs and that I've personally tried to do to help develop their boards and to expand their board's ability to and capacity to govern is that seeing this as a constant learning and educational process for all involved is very, very important. There's always something that a board can do different or can do better to improve their capacity and their performance, and helping the board to see that and helping guide the board towards improving upon that area so that they become much more effective and committed to their governing capacity, I think is something really critical. And that learning process can take many, many forms. It can be being very skilled at the mechanics or the administration of leading boards and leading board activities, but it also can be exposing volunteer board members or even full-time board members to an experience they otherwise won't have unless it's provided to them by the organization or leader in that organization. So using this as an educational opportunity to help the board expand their horizons, their capacities, is something I think that is really, really important for the CEO to really always be focused on and always look for those opportunities.
So I've had the opportunity to work with Doug Eady for nearly 27 years. I was a very young CEO of what was then called the Council for Urban Economic Development. I was 32 years old, and frankly, Doug kept talking to me about governing. How are you working with your board around governing? And I did not get it at that particular point in time. I had a staff of 8, and I had 45 board members. And I didn't need 45 board members governing me. I needed assistance. And I was hoping that, frankly, they would help me raise money and do many things. And I've learned that balance between the governance side and how I can leverage board members to assist me on the tactical side, how to get a contract, how to communicate with the media, how to raise money. But I think we've raised our game, obviously, or hopefully in that 32 years, and I think we've raised that game in 3 different ways. One, we are vigilant about making sure the board gets involved in a process that updates a strategic plan every other year. In fact, in June of this year, we will have a day-long retreat. The board will visit what we've done with the previous strategic plan. We will talk about how the world has evolved. We will update the strategic plan, and we will move forward. But each year, we take what the existing strategic plan and we build metrics around it. And not only do we build metrics around it, we build tactics around what we are going to do to achieve strategic plan goals that were laid out either that year or the previous year. And then we give a report card to the board both in June and in January each year saying, this is what you asked us to do from a higher level vision, and this is what we told you we would do, and this is what we accomplished. Second, we probably over-communicate. We, in order to keep the board knowledgeable of what we're doing, twice a month we send out a 15 to 20-page report on all the metrics that we're currently working on, things that they should know so that they have some understanding of what the 30-some staff at IEDC are working on and what we are accomplishing, and sometimes bearing our souls in terms of things that are causing problems for the organization, so that the 3 times a year that we see the full board and the 4 times a year we see the governance committee, nobody is surprised about what we're doing. There's lots of conversations in between time. And the third thing that we do is we retool. And a number of years ago, Doug Eady happened to be in town, and I was telling Doug that some of the governance problems that I was having at that point. And we had gotten ourselves into some bad karma. It wasn't, we frankly weren't governing. We had committees set up so that they focused on tactics, and they didn't see the bigger picture of the organization. And frankly, Doug took us through a process that at the emergence, at the end of that process, we came up with a governing process that we have today that works quite well for our organization. So the thing that IEDC has focused on over the last 3 years is we have focused almost like a laser on diversifying our board. I think organizations like ours, when we get lazy, we will end up with all white males on our board of directors. And my personal conclusions are that, frankly, white males may tend to be a little bit more assertive. They may be a little bit more aggressive. They may want to they are willing to put their name out there much quicker to serve on boards. But we looked in the mirror and we didn't like the direction we were going with the percentage of Latinos in the United States at this point, the percentage of African Americans, the percentage of women that are serving in economic development roles, the growing number of Asians and other minorities. We stopped back and said, we need to change the way we're going or we're going to become a defunct organization. And the people in the audience are going to look much different than the board at our conferences. So we've spent a lot of time looking at the composition of our board. We are international and focused. International is the fastest growing part of our membership, although not a huge portion yet. We now have 3 Canadian board members. We have 1 European board member. We are growing in all ethnic and demographic groups. One of the things that we did in order to achieve that is our last 3 chairs of our board actually created diversity task forces to make sure that both our advisory committees, that are the worker bees to get member engagement, achieve diversity both in their leadership and their participation. And the diversity committee was also to help seed candidates for the board that were then sent on to a nominations committee and a nominations process. And thank goodness we're achieving results. It's not without pain. It's not without a lot of self-criticism. It's not without some consternation, but we are achieving results that I think will be better for the organization over the long haul.
Yeah, and similarly to Jeff, the Tampa Bay Partnership here in Tampa Bay, Florida, serves a very large and very diverse region. As a regional organization, we cover 8 different counties, over 4.2 million people in our market, and we're made up of a partnership of local and county economic development organizations and local businesses that support the organization and participate in the activities of the organization. And a big part of my job is spending time, and I suspect it's the same with Jeff, is spending time identifying, targeting, recruiting, introducing, and socializing prospective board members and leadership candidates to others in the organization that may not have as much familiarity about an individual because they haven't worked in the specific city or county that that individual works in on a daily basis. So part of my job, both for the organization and bringing the region together, but also as a leader and somebody trying to develop board capacity, is always identifying talent. And we go about that in a number of different ways. We've developed a very significant and unique leadership program specific to this region and specific to what we do. We call it CEO Direct, and it's the idea that we're finding CEOs or their direct reports who can get actively involved, directly informed, directly engaged in the issues of the region. And this brings people together from all around the region to learn about the issues, see the assets that make up our region, the companies, the organizations, the institutions, the sights, the sounds, the scenery that Tampa Bay is composed of. And that begins as a training ground to help individuals who are involved in their own community or perhaps involved in the Tampa Bay Partnership to really get a feel for what this organization, what this region is about, and determine for themselves whether they want to get more actively involved in the work we do. And in turn, that builds relationships amongst those leaders going through the CEO Direct program. They get to know each other, and they get to really sort of self-evaluate each other. And that has helped us to build bench strength and to bring others into the Tampa Bay Partnership that might not otherwise be involved. And that's led to a lot of leadership opportunities throughout our organization, and some of our most recent chairmen and chairwomen have been participants in the CEO Direct program and have gone through a rather fast track to become a chair of the partnership. So as a CEO, my job is always to, what I would say, I'm a talent scout. Going back to that team analogy, I'm trying to find this year's draft choices and see if we can take them through the combine and find out whether or not they really are ready, willing, and able to get more actively involved in a leadership role, and then introduce them to the current leaders of the organization so that people begin to get comfortable with the opportunities, the leadership opportunities that might exist in the future. Well, I think the relationship between the CEO and the board chair is critically important, and I probably spend 75% of my time working directly with the chairman of my board on a variety of issues on an ongoing basis. The terms of our chairs are 1 year, and it's really important to help cultivate those leaders that are going through the succession to get to chairmanship, to cultivate them, to train them, to educate them, inform them, get them ready for their year in office, and then to be able to be there to support them so they can hit the ground running and have a successful year. So I spend a lot of time when someone is in the succession role, when they're the vice chair, ready to succeed up to the chair the next year, in understanding what they know about the organization, what their perspective is, where their particular areas of interest are, what their goals for the year are, and how those goals fit with the overall mission and purpose of the organization. And then once the chair once the individual becomes the chair, it's my job to really make sure that they have a very successful year and that they are fulfilling their duties. So I think that relationship is critically important. It doesn't start with the day that the gavel is dropped and the new chair steps in and you start with the training period then. It starts a year, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 and 5 years out, where you're helping them to get ready for this position, and then being able to support them, being their eyes and ears, giving them the tools that they need to be very successful leaders in the organization and to leave a mark in the organization. We're coming up on our 20th year at the Tampa Bay Partnership, and in celebration of this 20 years, we're talking about a concept of legacy of leadership. Not a new term, a term that's been used quite a bit, but we believe that this legacy of leadership, past, present, and future, is what has brought the partnership to this point of being involved in the economic development of the Tampa Bay region for 20 years, and will set the stage because of the leadership that is here currently, and because of the programs we've been able to develop and put in place to grow future leaders, will allow us to be a force in the community for the next 20 years. So that's the legacy of leadership that allows us to know where we've been, know where we are, know where we're going, and that same kind of work has to be done to help the chair through the support of the CEO to be successful and to be able to move the organization forward and move it forward in a very path of continuity, but a path of progress and ultimately change, because organizations and the Tampa Bay Partnership has certainly been one of those organizations that has changed based upon the changing needs of the community that we serve here in Tampa Bay.
It was earlier in January that Stuart and I actually had the opportunity to have dinner in Tampa when I was in his region, and we actually spent a fair amount of time talking about the CEO-chair relationship. And, you know, I've been very fortunate to have had a number of wonderful chairs. I think Stuart has had that same thing. That one of the big differences between the two of us is because he's dealing with private business people, he's actually had his own chain of succession interrupted from time to time. In my 27 years, I am in this envious position that I've never had that chain of succession interrupted. I had only one time I had somebody who said, hey, I've just taken on a new job. I would like to step aside for a year, not serve as chair at the time that I expect to, but would do the following year. So another person who was being groomed into our leadership just stepped forward a year, and we didn't skip a beat. I work with a board member before they become chair, typically has been on our board 7, 8, 9 years. They will join our board of directors. They will serve in a variety of capacities on a working committee. We have 3 working committees that actually Doug helped us identify what our working committees should be. One is external member relations, the other performance oversight and monitoring, and the other is planning and business development. And you can generally pick out who are going to be the people that are likely to be future leaders because, 1, they show up, 2, they come prepared, 3, they ask to take on more work. And those are the people that eventually get invited to serve as a vice chair of one of the committees. They then go on to become a chair of one of the committees, and then they end up lining up to become our treasurer, our vice chair of our board, our chair, and then we have an immediate past chair, and then they leave our board. So, you know, the one thing that happens kind of naturally is you get to know the person. You get to work with them as they work their way into your leadership. You end up having the opportunity to get to know them both professionally and personally, because at our events there are receptions, there are dinners, there are golf outings, there are opportunities to both bond on the professional side but also the personal side. The one thing that I do that I'm not the only association executive who does this. When the person is vice chair of our board, I take them to an event that the American Society of Association Executives has. I think they call it the CEO Chair Symposium or something like that. And this is a day-and-a-half training program, retreat, facilitation, where you and your vice chair spend essentially a day-and-a-half, day and 3/4 talking to each other. It's heavily facilitated, and there's lots of conversation, lots of good speakers, but they end up saying to you, will you and your partner work through this item? Will you and your partner discuss what are your personality differences after you're both having taken a Myers-Briggs test? They will say, you know, where does your organization fit on this this chart? Are you a growing organization or are you a declining organization? And it gives you an opportunity way in advance of that person actually becoming chair to get to know each other, both how do you work, your style of work, what makes you tick. I also then spend time with the incoming chair before they become chair, going through their what they want to achieve as chair, who they want to appoint to various committees. And one of the most important questions that I ask a chair is, how will I know whether I am meeting your needs or not, or how will I know that you think that I'm not meeting your expectations? And we actually have a very forthright conversation along those lines so that nobody is surprised at some point. I don't want to be surprised. I want there to be an open conversation about how they can deliver news that says, you're not doing this the way I want, or I'm not getting, the visibility I want out of this job, or you are making too many of the decisions. There's a lot of pressure points in that partnership that I want to make sure that we get right, and they are different depending upon style of chair. I'm fortunate that I can say, while that year where the person is chair, essentially your boss, and I've been the CEO, in virtually every case after they're no longer the chair, I can call them friends. And for me, that is that's the reward, that it meant you survived it well, and the person that you worked with on a very close basis for a year is somebody that you do want to look up if they're in your community, if you're in their community, and they want you to look you up if they're in yours. It's been a wonderful existence in that way.